Adults between the ages of 25 to 54 were given a test on logical reasoning and assigned a score between 0 and 100. Participants were randomly separated into two groups. The data is summarized in the dot plots above. Which of the following statements about the two groups is correct? So in this case, it's if you look at the answer choices, it's asking us about the standard deviation. Now, standard deviation tells us how spread out the data is. So all data, let's say you're looking at the heights of students, the data is going to have some center and is going to have some kind of spread. So this data set has some center and it's spread out in some sort of way. Now, you could have another data set that's very similar to that could have the same center. So if I draw kind of let's say I put these two on the same scale, and it could have the same center, but it could have a much smaller spread. So if you look at this data set, this is a much smaller spread. So the standard deviation tells us about the spread of the data, how far away the data is from that central, the center of the data. And in this case, the larger the standard deviation, so if the standard deviation is larger, the spread is larger as well. Spread is also larger. So the larger the standard deviation, the larger the spread of the data, or the farther away data points are from the center. So in this case, we just have to figure out which one is more spread out, and that will be the one that has the larger standard deviation. So in order to do that, we can just kind of draw, just a basic curve to fit around this so we can visualize the data. I just draw like little lines over it. And you don't have to be exactly precise. They're not going to give you something that requires you to pull out a ruler or anything like that. But basically, we're looking for which data is more spread out and which data is more clustered. So in this instance, we can see that group A is more clustered, right? So this data is more clustered. And this data is more spread out. So this data is more spread out. Therefore, it must have the larger standard deviation. This must have the larger standard deviation, and this must have the smaller standard deviation because it's more clustered. So the more clustered your data is, the smaller the standard deviation is going to be. The larger your standard deviation is, the more spread out your data is going to be. So in this case, our correct answer is letter choice B. The standard deviation of the scores in group A is smaller than the standard deviation of the scores in group B, which is exactly correct because this right here, group A, is going to have a smaller standard deviation than group B. So our correct answer is B for Batman.